Dubey sir, now you can unmute and speak.
Okay. Okay. So a very good morning to all the participants. It's a pleasure to be back again this Sunday. Our speaker this morning is Professor P. Krishna. I need not introduce him because most of us know him anyway. And Professor Krishna is going to talk to us on his journey with Krishnamurti and its effect on him. I want to put in a special word of welcome to Vishwanathji, the Secretary of the Krishnamurti Foundation, who is also a participant today. So welcome, sir. Welcome. And uh, Professor Krishna can take as long as he wants, and then the field will be open for question and answer session. So, sir, you can begin now and take as much as you want. Yeah, Professor Krishna, welcome, sir. Sir, unmute yourself. Unmute. Unmute, sir. Professor Krishna, unmute.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, now you can hear me, no?
Yes, yes, yes.
I want to begin with an apology because this talk is not going to be about Krishnamurti's teachings. It's going to be more about myself. Because that's what Sushil wanted. He said, we have heard you about Krishnamurti's teachings and we have also read about Krishnamurti's teachings, what you have read, written and so on. But we are more interested in knowing the effect those teachings had on you in your own life. I said, almost every aspect of my life has been affected by the teachings. So I don't know which part you are interested in. There is nothing that I have to hide. I'm willing to tell, but I'm not sure it is really of much interest for everyone. But he insisted. So I said, all right, I'll speak for 20, 30 minutes, introduce the topic, mention a few aspects, and then leave it. You can question me about any aspect that interests you more, and then I shall respond to your questions. So that's how this talk has been set up. So it means it's going to be more about my life and myself and the effect of Krishnaji's teachings on me rather than on the teachings per se. Now, I came across the teachings when I was rather young. I was only 17 years of age when I first started reading Krishnamurti, his talks with students. And the other book I read was Education and Significance of Life. And both these books interested me so much that I went to Rupayana's shop and looked for more books by Krishnamurti. And the only other book available at that time was First and Last Freedom. So those are the books that I studied from 1955 to 57. When I was still doing my MSc, BSc in Indore. At that time, I would say that the first effect that those teachings had was somewhat negative in the sense that I intellectually understood what he was pointing out, and the knowledge of Krishnamurti made me feel superior to other people, and I used that knowledge to argue with people intellectually and prove that I am superior to them. It took quite a while for me to realize that I was doing the same thing which he has forbidden, namely trying to compete with others or compare myself with others and prove my superiority over others. But eventually I realized the mistake in that. So one thing which I learned and which I have talked about also in dialogues is that half understanding of Krishnamurti is a dangerous thing, which means actually all of us are in a somewhat dangerous state because none of us has complete understanding of what Krishnaji is talking about. We have half understanding. So not to be too sure about that half understanding which we have, and not to let it produce a certain arrogance in us, because that would be simply contrary to what he is wanting the teachings to do, namely produce a religious mind. So religion is not just an intellectual inquiry. And you get the nuances of it only when you actually investigate it, the teachings in your own life through awareness and through observation and through doubt. It's somewhat similar to the understanding we develop in science. Unless you question and you solve problems and you apply the theorems that you have read and so on to solving various problems, your understanding doesn't go deeper. And if you just quote Newton's laws and produce them, you may reproduce them, you may get marks in the examination, but you don't really understand the import of those laws. In the same way, unless you investigate Krishnaji's teachings and apply them in your life, and then discover your own mistakes in doing that, your understanding does not really go deeper. And I think that is the real reason why Krishnaji in every talk of his insisted that please don't agree with what I say, don't also reject it, but investigate what I am saying and discover the truth to which I am pointing. That discovery is not just an intellectual conclusion. You have to actually come upon it as a perception in your own life and in your own consciousness. Only then it becomes a truth for you, and it is the perception of the truth that transforms consciousness. Otherwise, it is just knowledge of Krishnamurti's teaching held in your mind. And it has the same function as any other knowledge. You can flaunt it and use it to compare yourself with others or to denounce others and so on. Then you are not come upon the religious mind. You are merely using the knowledge of Krishnamurti the same way as you use the knowledge of science or art or music or anything else. So that's one thing I learned, that you have to investigate the teaching. The other thing I learned in life was that we are deeply conditioned. Our minds are deeply conditioned by the family in which we grew up, the culture in which we were born and brought up, and that you need to inquire deeply and not just follow that culture or that tradition blindly. So that becomes part of the inquiry or the investigation. Not everything in your conditioning is damaging or harmful, but there are many things which are damaging and harmful. And so you need to examine and discover what is true and what is false for yourself and discard that which is false. Now, the first victim of the conditioning, my conditioning, was Krishnamurti himself. Because I had an image of what a religious sage is like a Buddhist sage who is Sthita Pragya. It doesn't matter what happens, he is unperturbable, undisturbed. And then the image of Gandhi with a loincloth, living in voluntary poverty, and so on. And he was completely different from all that. So I judged him from that image, and I felt, what kind of sage is this? He lives with rich people, and he travels by air. What does he know? And he criticizes all other gurus. What does he think of himself? Does he think he is the only guru, the only one who has come upon the truth, and so on? So I started judging him and questioning him whether he is really religious. So for a long time, for a few years, this went on. There was a kind of love-hate relationship between me and Krishnamurti. There were aspects of him which I did not agree with. Not because there was something wrong with him, but because I had a conditioned mind and I was judging other people based on that conditioning, including Krishnamurti himself. So it took a few years for me to come out of this error and realize that it is not a question of judging him. Why am I judging him and evaluating him? What has that to do with my understanding of life? So instead of doing that, I need to investigate my own opinions and views and feelings and discover for myself, all of which Krishnaji called as self-knowledge. So this whole investigation is to come upon self-knowledge and not knowledge of Krishnamurti or judgment of other people. Once you realize that, your real learning begins. So you start questioning all tradition. And questioning doesn't mean you blindly discard tradition. I mean, there are obvious things which are harmless in tradition, but there are also things which are harmful. And so you have to examine that. Socrates also said that an unexamined life is not worth living. And I realized that that is what Krishnaji is pointing out. Once you start doing that, it begins to affect almost all decisions in your life. Because the decisions then don't come just from conditioning, but the decisions come from this inquiry, whether those decisions are healthy or they are unhealthy. Not healthy or unhealthy from some religious belief or point of view, but simply from the point of view of whether it leads to happiness and prosperity and kindness, or it is unkind, cruel, and so on. And you're just calling it culture and giving it a different name and not realizing that it is cruel. So when you start doing that, all religious dogmatism goes out of the window. So all casteism went out of the window, all religious division and belief, extremist beliefs went out of the window. And you are able to think independently in your own life and lead life independently. Now, some practical examples of this are that I had 4 daughters and I did not subject them to all the restrictions that Hindu society imposes on girls. I treated them just like sons. I educated them. I acted as a friend to them, gave them advice, told them that they are free to learn whatever they want to learn. Also, to marry whomever they want to marry, irrespective of caste or color or religion or nationality. But they should consult me and I will help them to take the right decision from the point of view, not whether that person belongs to our caste or community or religion, but whether he is a good human being with whom she is likely to be happy. And if I thought otherwise, I would explain to her, but leave it to her to take the decision. So all my daughters, they married by their own choice, and they married from different communities and different states. They married only Indians because they were educated in India and they met only Indians. But there was no limitation of any kind. So that is one effect which Krishnaji's teaching had on my life. Then in 1957, I went to Delhi University to do my MSc. And there I met Krishnaji for the first time. I heard him in 1957 during the 57-58 winter. And I met him in January 58 in the home of Mr. Shivarao, who was a family friend. He had grown up along with my father in Adyar during the 1900 to 1922 period. So Krishnamurti was also among the people who was brought up there around that time. And my father was only 3 years younger than, 2 years younger than Krishnamurti. So he told me about Krishnaji's life and the prediction of world teacher and so on. And then I read the book Candles in the Sun, which was the first biography written by Emily Litjens, the mother of Mary Litjens. He had a strange life because of all this intervention with masters and predictions and the following of the masters and all that. So I asked him when I first met him, "Sir, what was all that? You people sat around a table and talked to dead spirits and brought messages, and then you followed those messages. Was all that hallucination?" And he said, "No, sir, those things exist. It's another form of power. It has nothing to do with goodness. So I'm not interested in it. That was his answer. He did not deny the existence of the masters and so on. But he just said that it's not important. And I realized that in life, he is saying, don't depend on any master, whether living or dead. Because when you take instructions from a master, your own intelligence doesn't grow. And his whole teaching is about the awakening of your own intelligence, which means your own wisdom, your own capacity to discern what is true and what is false. So that's the other thing one learned from Krishnaji's teachings, which was important, that it is not important to follow anyone, and that you can't really follow a wise man unless you have the wisdom which he has. And so the important thing is to come upon the wisdom, and that includes Krishnamurti himself, who was obviously a wise man. Unless you have that wisdom which he has, you can't really be a follower of Krishnamurti. When you follow someone without coming upon the wisdom, you are a pseudo. You are not really living that life, but you are pretending to live that life. And it's better to be oneself and to learn about oneself than to try to follow someone else other than you. So that was an important thing one learned, because normally one was choosing to follow either follower of Gandhi or follower of Buddha or follower of the Gita and things like that. The whole concept of following, one realized that it was false. You can't follow. You have to come upon whatever wisdom you can. The other thing which I learned from his teaching was that you should not be fearful of the future, that you should meet life without fear. Now, if you have many ideas that you need to be rich, you need to be successful, you need to have first division and so on, then you have the fear that what happens if I don't get that? And so that's how ambition develops. It's the other side of fear. But if you are fearless, then you can pursue what you love to do. And you do it for the love of it, not in order to achieve a result. And this started affecting my studies, because I began to now do my physics for the love of it. That means for the understanding of the subject, rather than for getting marks in the examination and so on. So my understanding of the subject deepened, but my performance at the examination was affected. In the MSc previous, I got second-class marks. For the first time in my life, I was a second divisioner. I was not disappointed, because I believed that the understanding was more important than getting the marks. The reason was that in the question paper, I knew the answer to all the questions, but the derivations at MSc level are so intricate that if you sit down and try to do it there while writing the question paper, you can't answer all the 6 questions. It takes too long. So I knew all the questions, but I could answer only 3. And that's the reason I got second division. So my knowledge was more, but my performance at the exam was affected. And this was a direct consequence of what I had learned from Krishnaji. I made up for it in the final year and ultimately got a first division. But I had stopped comparing myself with others, wanting to be the first in the class and so on. Indeed, I discovered that the boy who stood first in the class was one Madan Mohan Bindal, who only memorized question paper answers to the questions, didn't know much physics, had a beautiful handwriting, answered all the question papers in that beautiful handwriting by memorizing how much to write in each question. So answered all the questions, got more marks than the most brilliant student in our class. So there is a technique for getting marks in the examination without acquiring the knowledge. But Krishnaji's teaching was completely the opposite, that you go for education to broaden the horizons of your mind. And so that's what I was trying to do. Then it also affected my choice of my specialization. All my colleagues, they went for the most prominent topics like superconductivity or quantum mechanics or elementary particle physics, which were the latest topics in those days for research. I chose on the basis of my teacher. There was my teacher called Ajitram Verma, who was a fine gentleman. He had just returned from England, and he was a reader in physics, but he used to explain extremely well. And I was very interested in his teaching of optics and crystallography. So I chose that as my specialization and joined research with him subsequently, without caring whether that is going to be the latest subject and what kind of job it will get me and so on. So that's why I'm saying, once you get into the teaching, it begins to affect everything in your life, all your decisions, all your... I have never regretted that decision, because that relationship with Professor Verma, I learned a lot in my life, and it lasted, because that very year in 1959, when I completed my master's and joined research with him, he got appointed as professor and head of the department in Banaras University. And with him, I also shifted to Banaras. There in Banaras, Krishnaji used to come to this school, the Rajghat Besant School, and hold talks with students and with teachers and also with the public. So I used to go on my bicycle. It's about 10 miles. And through the city, it is about 7 miles. I used to go on my bicycle, attend his lectures and put a lot of questions, because I had no fear of my teachers or elders. And I had learned from Krishnaji to be quite fearless. So I have mentioned all that in the kind of questions that I put to Krishnaji in my book about him. You can read it there. So he began noticing me as a prominent person interested in the teachings. And I got invited to have lunch with him and to join the small group dialogues that he used to hold. And so he began to recognize me as a good, enthusiastic student of his teachings. Gradually, whatever misunderstandings I had about him disappeared as my understanding grew and my images of what is a guru and what is a religious man broke down. And I realized that real religion is virtue, and virtue is a byproduct of self-knowledge or wisdom. So this whole inquiry is about coming upon wisdom. And for that, you need to actually live the teachings. It is not enough to only discuss the teachings and argue them, because unless you actually practice them in your life, your understanding of them does not really grow deeper. When I say practice, I mean investigation of the teaching. Then it affected everything, the way I brought up my children, the help I could give for them to choose their subjects, the non-acceptance of many traditions that were followed in Benares, because Benares was a very traditional city. Girls wouldn't even go on bicycle. When myself and my wife would go on bicycle to listen to Krishnaji, children used to come out of their homes and say, "Look, mother, a girl going on bicycle." That's how it was. She was one of the first few girls to go on bicycle in Benares. And similarly, in Benares Hindu University, there was a lot of tradition which was completely nonsensical, and I didn't follow that. One example that I would like to quote here is that a very senior professor came and said to me, very well-meaningly from his point of view, that I have come to talk to you about something. Your girls have now grown up. They were 12, 13 years of age. And you should not let them go around on bicycle. I said, why? Why should girls not go around on bicycle? And he said, because it creates desire in the minds of boys. So I said, why don't you teach your boys to handle desire? They will come across it anyway. And you will have to teach them how to handle desire. To expect that girls should not go on bicycle because it produces desire in the minds of boys. It's not their mission to prevent desire in the minds of boys. And so on. So lot of discussions like that used to take place. A colleague of mine was a professor in my department, and he was getting married. And I went to attend his marriage. There I saw a lot of money being exchanged from one bag into another. And I felt disgusted at what is this kind of marriage in which all this money is changing hands. So I couldn't stand it. I came away. Then I wrote a long letter to him saying, you are also a professor, you are a PhD, you have visited Sweden and so on. Why do you want to take somebody else's money just because you are marrying his daughter? And he met me afterwards and he said, Professor Krishna, thank you for your letter. What you say is right for you, but what I am doing is right for me. So his mind had created a division between him and me, saying, you are a free man, you are not in caste and community and so on. For you, it is all right to do that. I am still bound in caste and community and family. And for me, this is the right thing to do. So he defined this right thing in that way. But I never made these issues into quarrels with people or into judgments about all the people. I realized that they are trapped in certain tradition, certain amount of ignorance. And I have also my own ignorance. And it's more important to get rid of my ignorance rather than compare myself with others and say you are more blind than me. So gradually all this learning continued, and big cultural shocks came when I first went to England in 1964 as a British Council scholar after my PhD as a postdoctoral fellow. There I found that Western culture was extremely different from Indian culture. And things which we considered wrong were considered normal there. Professors would drink alcohol and make parties and dance and so on. What was anathema to us in India in those days. So in the beginning, I was a bit disgusted, but the inquiry persisted, and it is my conditioning which is saying this. What is wrong with what they are doing? Are they making themselves miserable? Or is it just a different structure of society in which they are living? Similarly, their relationships with their parents, with friends and so on, were very different from our relationships with parents and friends and so on. So I realized that these two societies are built on different structure. The people here are not unkind or evil, but they are different from us. So not to create division out of difference, but to understand the difference. That was one thing I learned during that trip to England, where I came across a different form of conditioning of the mind. I realized that even a man like Gandhiji, wise man like Gandhiji, when he was asked, what do you think of Western culture? Said it would be a good idea to have one. So from his point of view, Western culture was not culture at all. But that's only when you judge Western culture by Indian ideas and Indian sense of morality. But when you see that they have grown up with a different sense of morality and a different social structure, then you begin to understand their life and that they are not evil people. So all that you learn, but you have to stay with these questions, investigate them in your own life and come upon that understanding. So I'll end it here. And in any aspect, if you want to ask me, I'm quite open. You can ask me any question you want, either about the teachings or about Krishnaji or about its effect on my life, any aspect of my life. I'll be happy to answer whatever I know. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It was a very interesting discourse. I have a question in the chat box. I'll ask that before I take up questions from other people. I think Harshad Bhai has raised his hand. Are wisdom and goodness at the same level? And the second question is goodness a byproduct of wisdom or is the other way?
depends on how you define goodness. Normally, we are brought up to think that somebody who practices good acts is a good man, and you define those good acts, giving alms to the beggar, helping the sick and the poor, being charitable, etc., are good acts. Being vegetarian, not killing animals, and so on, are good acts, virtuous acts. But you learn from Krishnaji that you cannot define virtue in terms of actions and then practice them and come upon virtue. That virtue is really a state of being, a state of mind, in which there is love, compassion, kindness, goodness. So it has to be at the level of consciousness, not simply at the level of action. Otherwise, you can find instances like Hitler. Hitler was a vegetarian. Now, the vegetarianism didn't create compassion or kindness in him. Maybe he was compassionate towards animals, we don't know. But towards human beings, he was certainly not compassionate. So you could be extremely cruel and still be performing some acts of kindness. And this is quite common in society. You notice that people visit the temple and feel virtuous because they go to temple every day, but they come home and they beat their wife and children and they are cruel, but they don't realize, they think that they are virtuous because they have done some virtuous act. So it becomes a way of feeling virtuous without coming upon virtue. That's the illusion in it. So real goodness has to be at the level of the heart, not just at the level of action.
Thank you, sir. The other question was, is goodness a byproduct of wisdom or is the other way? Mr. Krishna, your image has frozen. Yeah, okay. So you want me to repeat that question?
Which question?
The second question was, is goodness a byproduct of wisdom or it's the other way?
Yeah, it is a byproduct of wisdom. Real goodness, the real transformation of consciousness is a byproduct of wisdom. Wisdom means this discernment comes from self-knowledge, which is this discernment of what is true and what is false. And I've just given you examples from my own life, how my mind was caught up in many false things. And gradually, as the false things disappeared, the thinking changed, in the mind changed. I cannot say that that is total wisdom, but whatever illusions you are able to end in your mind brings a certain amount of goodness in your consciousness.
Okay, sir. Thank you. We have Dr. Harshad Parekh. Yes, sir. Go ahead. I can't hear you.
Are you here now?
Yes, we heard you. We can hear your voice now. Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, Professor Krishna. And what you said about that when we understand intellectually what Krishnamurti is saying, then there is some kind of superiority comes. And this happened to me also, that then we begin to criticize everybody who doesn't agree with us. And so one has to really be free from this superiority or inferiority and then we can really listen. And if we don't agree with the person, we can ask very gently good questions and learning. So I think that is a real sign of understanding. Krishnamurti means understanding ourselves. And when we understand ourselves, our life becomes more clear and enjoyable. And we begin to see how we are creating problems for ourselves. Like if somebody says something unpleasant and we get upset, then at that time we have to ask, what is it that makes me angry or upset? And that is the real learning. So I feel that a real understanding of Krishnamurti means understanding of ourselves and be free from many problems which we create for ourselves. And later on, I feel, and even now, I feel that there is nothing to understand, only to see whatever is happening. And in one dialogue which we had with Krishnaji in Rishi Valley, and Krishnaji also said there is nothing to understand in this field which he was talking about. And then Krishnaji said, do you agree? And Pupulji said, sir, how you can say that there is nothing to understand? And then again Krishnaji said, there is nothing to understand. Do you agree? And there were all many teachers were there. And I said, sir, I agree with you. Then Krishnaji said that you tell Pupulji, why do you say that there is nothing to understand? So I say that there is only to see whatever is happening and seeing it effortlessly. And when we see it, that problem or whatever, uh, it goes away. It's like perception is the action. That is what Krishnaji says. So the teachings are about seeing everything clearly, what is happening within us. And so when anger is arising, we can see the anger is arising, or this fear or loneliness or boredom, all these problems. So I feel that when we become very, very sensitive and alert, then we can see everything. And then there is no need to have dialogue and discuss with so many words, because everything is non-verbal. I feel ultimately is to see everything clearly. Okay, I thank you very much.
Yes, Harshad. The wisdom is at the level of perception, and perception is always seeing. So when we talk about understanding, it is the understanding that comes from seeing, not just the intellectual understanding. The intellect is only one fragment. It has the value of creating the question, and it has the value of communicating with each other. But other than that, it has no vision of its own. So the seeing is the important part. And Krishnaji has made that clear. And we need to be aware of this. That is why you have to rely on silence and awareness and listening and watching, and not merely argument and intellectual understanding.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Mr. Harishankar Iyer, please go ahead.
Professor Krishnaji, I've got one question. I would say it's a dilemma haunting you most of the time. The way you described about your skepticism to start with Krishnaji, and it took some years for you to reconcile and understand him better. So that was at an early age, I guess. But what I would like to point out here, most of us, the moment somehow we get caught on with these teachings. Apparently, what you indicated also, the drive to be to compare and to be competitive, that suddenly takes a backseat. So now the worry is we are living in a real world. At the same time, we are also trying to explore and find out how to make it meaningful and peaceful internally for us. So this creates a kind of flip-flop situation where on one hand, initially you intellectually appreciate Krishna's teachings, then you also know that it can be practiced and it gives a sense of peace and non-conflict situation. At the same time, you have to carry on your academic studies or career and stuff like that. So there you need to be having a center, something to drive you towards that. I'm coming back to your schools. You have got young children, school students learning Krishnaji's teaching at a much early age. I can understand. I started knowing Krishnaji at a much later stage, but it had a profound impact. So when a youngster starts listening to Krishnaji, that is the time it's formative, the career has to be set, and you need to have the drive and motivation to succeed. So what is the kind of conflict or internal tug of war that happens in the students' minds, or it doesn't matter at all? How do you look at it? Since you have been managing schools yourself, the first hand, do you think that they also become the so-called, within quotes, the successful and somebody achieving in their chosen area in the real world? And as a human, of course, the Krishna's teachings has an impact. Also, there is a second part to this question. Most of us, as we travel towards this line, we come across various gurus and we have some textbook knowledge about various teachings. Then once we tumble upon Krishnaji's teaching, for most of us, it stops there. There is no further seeking or looking for a guru. Is that the case with you or with everybody? What is your take on that? These are all my questions, sir. Thank you.
The second question is simpler. The search for a guru ends when you realize that you cannot really get any deep perception from another person or guru, that it is something that has to come from within you. And therefore, you are the teacher and you are the student. And the subject is life itself. So you have to investigate and you have to come upon the perception for yourself. The perception cannot be given, not even by Krishnaji. So that's the answer to the second question of yours. The first question is more complex because children come with their own conditioning from their families, and they belong to the parents who put various demands on them and judge them and so on. So they have fear of the parents. They want good opinion of the parents. They have fear of examinations, and they have all the problems of comparison and so on. And you can only create this inquiry in their mind, plant these questions, and different students will investigate to different extents and come upon their own understanding. You cannot teach Krishnaji's teachings like a subject and expect that everybody has understood. That's just not possible. It's a imaginary state. So one does not really teach Krishnaji's teachings in the Krishnamurti schools. One creates an inquiry, atmosphere of inquiry, of non-violence, of consideration for each other, and of, I would say, tolerance, but always subject to inquiry. Now, once you inculcate this inquiry, just as if you inculcate scientific inquiry, the student can go with that scientific inquiry to any distance in scientific investigation. In the same way, once he learns to have this inquiry of self-knowledge, it is up to him how far he goes. You can't control that. But as a teacher, it is important for us to plant this seed of inquiry into them. The other is that as the child is growing up, it is important to create activities which produce sensitivity. Sensitivity, if you care for it, because if you are not sensitive, there are many things in life which you will not notice, which will just pass by. So the perception of beauty, the perception of goodness, kindness, forgiveness, all that, the child automatically learns all that if it is there in the atmosphere in the school. So the teachers also have to be living the teachings. Then only it communicates. It doesn't, you cannot communicate it like a course in a classroom. And that is both the difficulty and the challenge of a Krishnamurti school.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Mr. Kartick Gupta, would you please ask your question? Unmute yourself and ask. Mr. Kartick Gupta.
Clemice has raised a hand long ago. So give her a chance after this. Yeah.
I'll come to Clemice.
Hello.
He raised his question earlier, so I'll. Yes.
Okay.
Kartick Gupta speaking. Hello.
Yes, please
Hello.
go ahead. Go ahead.
I have a question. That the question is life uncertain and in disorder, or certain and in order at the deeper level of existence?
At the deepest level, there is order, but our own mind creates a lot of disorder. And so to understand how our mind creates disorder and not to create it, that is the teaching, that is the learning. So for that, you have to have a learning mind. A learning mind is not an assertive mind or an arguing mind, but a listening mind, a doubting mind, and a questioning mind. Also, it has to have perception and sensitivity. A lot of qualities are required for a true learning mind. And that learning mind is the religious mind. So the extent to which your inquiry is a religious inquiry is dependent on you, not on somebody else. He cannot create a religious inquiry. Krishnaji made it very clear in one of his talks in Bombay, I think 1984. He said, put your intellect in your heart. It has no value outside it. It's a rather drastic statement. But he's saying without love and compassion, without the background of love and compassion, whatever intellectual ability you have will go wrong. And you see that example of that in the world, that we have made so much progress and knowledge and all that, but we are constantly killing each other and in war. So we are lacking at the heart level, no? And we are not lacking at the intellectual level. So the intellect without the heart is destructive.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Clemice, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. There is one question that I would like to ask Professor Krishna, which is, in the beginning, he said that when he started to listen and to read Krishnamurti, he felt, because he criticizes all other gurus and all that, and he felt, how can he do that? So my question is, do you see there is a danger that the people who read Krishnamurti and who try to understand him, because he criticizes so much other gurus and all these things, that these people become rather radical and start to think that before Krishnamurti there was no one wise, and after Krishnamurti there can be nobody wise. And that is the trap of falling into this only Jesus save idea, which means there is only Krishnamurti who knows, which is completely contrary to what he expected, to what he tried to convey, which is you have to understand for yourself and not believe, because I feel we don't really understand what he was criticizing when he was talking about this whole guru system. That's my feeling. We don't really understand what he meant and what he wanted to say. That means we have to understand and we have to see the whole thing for ourselves, and not just because he said and then we borrow that idea and also go on criticizing and start to become against this, against that, and all this.
I don't know why he did that, but it did seem to me that he liked to shock the public out of their stupor. So he would make drastic statements like burn the Gita or something like that, which would put up all the backs of all the Hindus and so on and create antagonism. But in private, when afterwards you question him, he would say, of course, sir, I don't mean that literally. I mean that your dependence on the Gita is a barrier. And you need to get beyond that. That's what I mean. But he often put it in his lectures in that way. I think that people are so sleepy and so willing to just agree with anything that he like to wake them up by making such statements. That's my conjecture. I don't really know. I wish he was there, then we could ask him.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Murali Krishna, you had a question. Would you ask it now, please? Mr. Murali Krishna. I think he's not responding, so we'll go to Mr. Dinesh Waghmare. Yes, sir. Go ahead. Unmute yourself. Yeah.
Are you able to listen to me, sir?
Yes.
Sir, my question is, at this stage also, what is the portion of the Krishnamurti's teachings which you do not find in tune with your own understanding? Or what is the portion which still you find it as a mysterious, or which still you find as not understandable?
There are many statements of his which one doesn't understand. Like he says, there is an awareness that cuts right through sleep. I don't know what he means by that, because I don't have any awareness during sleep. And similarly, the fact that he could heal people, that he could look and predict what is going to happen in the future. And there's a lot of mystery about his own life, all that. I have no idea what it is. What is that process that he went through? Was it really masters and something? Some people were doing something to his brain and so on. If you read his biography, there are a lot of things which we don't understand. But it is not important for us to understand that, because it's not important to understand Krishnamurti, what happened to him, except from the point of view of knowledge and science and so on. But it is more important to understand yourself. And there I find that Krishnaji's teachings are quite unique, because he is saying, just be yourself. Don't try to imitate others or follow some wise man or have certain values you stick to as principles and so on. Be yourself, watch yourself, and whenever you come across a conflict or a negative emotion, investigate it, use it as an opportunity for learning about yourself, from where did it arise, and so on. And in this inquiry, you will discover many illusions that you are harboring about or in your approach to life. And you can correct them. So not to have regrets and not to judge whether you are a success or a failure. Just be yourself. Don't pretend to be other than what you are. You are all right. And there's no need to have great ambition and become something else. That only creates more complication. So to be oneself and to be content with that, and at the same time, not content in the sense of being complacent, so that you are inquiring and learning about life. That's how I understand him.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. We have Chaya Devi. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead. Ask your question.
Professor Krishna ji, thank you very much, and my sincere appreciation for your wonderful talks. I have learned a lot from your talks. Sir, you have seen Krishnamurti for about 30 years or so. My query to you is, sir, he talks about passion so very differently, and his talks in the later years, perhaps after his 82nd or 83rd year, at that age also, I could see that energy and inner stamina. Sir, please explore your insights to what you have understood, the passion in Krishnamurti, sir. What is it you have seen in him regards to that passion which he always talked and inspired many writers and artists world over, sir?
Yes. Normally we associate passion with the ego. That is, you have a mission to accomplish something, you want to become something, and you have a great passion for that. Or you want to acquire something and you have a great passion to acquire that, whether it be a woman or a factory or whatever, like that. That passion is born of the ego, and in the ego, the destruction is inherent, because there is violence there and there is division there and so on. So what Krishnaji is talking about is a passion which is devoid of the ego. Once you have no ego, does your passion disappear? So then you don't know what love is. The passion of love is without ego. Like a scientist who really wants to discover why the sky is blue or how the universe originates.
Professor Krishna, sir, your mic is not functioning, or something wrong with the audio. I think it has frozen.
Should I phone him?
Yes. No, I think he must be trying. You can call him.
हाँ टीवी वाला तो फोन कर रहा है बिजली वाला।
हाँ हम कब हटा देते हैं लेकिन अभी हटा दिए हैं। बिजली
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, the electricity went off for a while, and so the internet also went off. If you can tell me where I was, I can continue from there.
Sir, you are talking about the passion, which is basically without ego. That is where
That's right. That's right. That means when you do something for the love of it. Now in our life, what you find is that we do things for the love of it. We often grow a garden or a plant and care for it, or look after a pet without any great demands for ourselves out of it. So we are capable of love, of doing something which is not coming from the self. But we give importance only to that where our ambition lies, namely in our profession or our, if you're learning a subject, then achievement in that subject and so on. So this is a deep-rooted conditioning which you get from society, that ambition is important and that you must be ambitious, otherwise you will not achieve anything and so on. It is not true. You can demand excellence of yourself without ambition. You can play a game for the love of the game and attain excellence which is not comparative, because you enjoy playing that game. So it does not detract from excellence, but the excellence is not in comparison with somebody else. If you like, it's in comparison with oneself. You want to improve yourself, that's fine, that's passion. Now in the life of Krishnamurti, you would have noticed that he speaks with the same passion when he is speaking to a school child as when he is speaking to David Bohm. Normally, what happens to us, we ignore the school child. We say, what does he know? Keep quiet, ask some question, things like that. We ignore him. And we have great passion when it comes to someone like David Bohm, then we are paying all attention and so on. But he is not like that. He related with servants, with scientists, with philosophers, with children, with the same quality of passion. That passion comes from a heart full of love. Ego in it. He is not demanding anything in return for himself. That's the religious mind, true religious mind. To come upon that, you have to free yourself from this domination of the self, freedom from the ego. And all this self-knowledge and wisdom is ultimately for that ending of the self, the importance of the self in your life.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. We have Mr. Dakshina Murthy. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are.
Yes.
Yeah. Good morning, sir. And thank you for taking my question. I have one practical problem I wanted to discuss with you. It appears to me that the teachings are very difficult to follow and implement for a family man, for a man, a gruhastu, a man with a wife and children, etc. I will give one or two examples from my own life. When I came across Krishnaji's teachings, I was quite serious and I thought I should not visit temples. But my wife was a devotee and she loves to go to temples, etc. And I discussed that with her and told her about my line of thinking. She said, it's all right, but somebody should take me to the temple, drive me to the temple, etc. So I used to drive my wife and children to the temple, and I used to go for a walk when they go inside the temple to see the God and do their prayers and all. And then I realized my son, who was 7, 8 years old, he started having doubts. Papa is not coming to the temple, why? And mommy is asking me to pray to the God. So there is a difficulty for the young mind whether he should worship the God in the temple or he should follow his father and not worship the God. Then I found I should not create this kind of a problem in the young mind. Unnecessarily, they will also get distracted. So I started joining them and going inside the temple also. Then I realized, I think, am I a hypocrite? I don't believe in God in temple, but I'm going to the temple and I'm taking prasad, etc., etc. Likewise, when the children were going to school and they have these Independence Day, etc., where they are asked to write some essays, some debating competition on the national anthem, all these things about the nation. They come to me and ask some questions to give some inputs and all that. Again, I have this dilemma. How can I tell them that nation is not the right thing? It is a glorified tribalism. Because of the nation, the wars have been created. How can we tell those young minds? And they will also may not like it. And in the school also, all the children are participating in the Independence Day activities and enjoy it thoroughly, compete, etc. Likewise, when we go to a movie as a family, they play the national anthem. If everybody gets up and I don't get up.
You are giving many examples, but the central point,
that's all, sir. I'm closing to the end.
Yeah.
So what do you say about this, sir?
Yes, I will tell you. There is, in my view, nothing in Krishnamurti saying do this, don't do this. Whatever you do with full awareness and don't associate any illusion with doing that. That's the teaching. It's the illusion that corrupts the activity. There's nothing wrong in going to the temple. Who said don't go to the temple? Go to the temple, and then you know that there is that symbol representing some power which is beyond normal human power, and it is just a symbol. And they are singing some songs and bhajans and kirtan. You can enjoy the silence of it, the beauty of it, the structure of the temple. You can look at it. What's wrong with that? Nothing is wrong with that. The only thing wrong is that you think that this has all made you virtuous. That's an illusion. You have not become virtuous. You have just enjoyed yourself in going to the temple. So this associating virtue with going to the temple is the problem. That's not a religious activity. It is a cultural activity which you are doing. It's all right. Your wife feels peaceful in doing that. There's nothing wrong with that. There are so many activities which we do. You sing a song, you feel nice, no? In singing the song.
Yeah,
what is wrong with that? But if you say, I'm becoming virtuous, I'm becoming religious because I'm singing this song, it's nonsense. So just avoid the illusion, that's all. There's nothing, it's an innocent activity.
Sir, Krishnaji himself said there is no God in the temple, and normally he doesn't go to the temples. And because I read his teachings and I want to practice.
Yeah, but you have to inquire. Say, what do you mean by God? Have you deeply inquired into that first? Otherwise, whether there is God in the temple or not in the temple, first you have to know what you mean by God. There are various concepts about God, And Krishnaji has denied all the concepts, but he has not denied God. Similarly, there are various concepts about the sacred. Krishnaji has denied all the concepts you have about the sacred, but he has not denied the sacred. He has said you have to discover the sacred. You have to discover what really God is, but not by accepting this religion's opinion or that religion's opinion and so on. Opinion is not God. So positive as the unknown and find out for yourself. That is the teaching.
Thank you, sir.
There is a deep conditioning which we grow up, which is affecting you. Namely, we have all been told what to do, what not to do. And so we are trying to, after reading Krishnaji's teaching, we are deciding what should I do, what should I not do. And he has not said that. He has not said that. That is, your mind, your conditioning is creating those notions.
Thank you, Professor Krishna. Mr. Murali Krishna, you want to ask now?
Yes, sir. Sir,
Please go ahead.
Sir, Krishnaji denied organized religion. It is well known to everybody. But what is his view on how this universe came into existence, how this life originated, like that? Because in some videos I have seen, he denied God. Sometimes he accepted God. It seems some contradictory is there. That's why I'm asking. Here I am asking.
As far as I understand, his teaching is that no view is the truth. The view is just a concept. The concept is not a truth.
Yeah.
To discover that for yourself is wisdom. And it is important to come upon the wisdom. So find out for yourself whether there is reincarnation or not. But you want the answer from somebody else, whether there is reincarnation or not. But you don't want to raise your own consciousness to a level where you can find the answer for yourself. And it is this raising of the consciousness to that level which is important. That's the teaching.
Okay, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Mr. Pradeep Verma, please go ahead.
Yes. Am I audible, sir?
Yes.
Yeah, Varmaji, namaskar.
Namaskar, sir. Namaskar to
Namaskar.
Certain words and their meaning conditioned my consciousness and became questions. These may be wrong questions, but questions nonetheless. The first question is the state of consciousness before it becomes content. All are related questions, so it will not be difficult for you. Second question is, if consciousness is the content, that is past thought, memory, material.
So do you mind at my age, I find it difficult to hold a number of questions and then answer them.
Please,
If I may answer one question at a time. Yeah.
Okay.
So
first question.
Consciousness without content is awareness.
Awareness. Okay.
Consciousness without content is just awareness.
Okay. Okay. So, if so, this second question becomes a little irrelevant. If conscious is the content, that is past thought, memory, material process that can be retrieved, then it is matter. When we say content,
what he said about this was consciousness as we know it is its content.
Yeah. Yes.
So what the common man knows as his consciousness is its content, which is the conditioning. Only when you free yourself of the conditioning, then you come upon awareness.
Very good. Thank you very much, sir. Whether transformed consciousness is the content or the space or emptiness? Transformed consciousness.
It is emptiness, but it is it's the same as the silent mind. because all the thought process, the chattering comes from the conditioning. And when the conditioning is not dominant, when you are free from the conditioning, then you come upon the silent mind. And what the silent mind perceives is the truth.
Another small question, sir. Whether discerning can be cultivated or taught. Discernment, because Vivek Buddhi.
As you practice it in your life, you may make mistakes initially, but you will discover the mistakes as you go along. And so your capacity for discernment can get refined.
Okay.
Can get refined. Yeah.
Thank you, Krishna ji. Thank you very much.
You're most welcome, sir. Welcome.
Thank you, sir. I think we have come to the end of the talk. I want to thank Professor Krishna profusely for sparing his time and being with us. It's always a pleasure for me to hear him. And thank you very much, sir. Next Sunday, we have Miss Jackie McKinley. She will be talking to us. Now, this will be at 6:30 p.m. Next Sunday at 6:30 p.m. And Jackie will be talking to us on you are learning by observing yourself, by watching. So if you're free, please do join us. And it will be next Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for being with us.
You're welcome. Thank you.